Existence of the Lindsay Clancy trial proves how much society hates women. Why is there even a trial? Literally, this trial is boiling down to, will this jury believe that postpartum depression exists? That's the entire prosecution and defense. Prosecutors decide what cases they bring to court. Prosecutors are given evidence, and then they decide, based off those documents, what charges to bring in court. There's no mandatory they have to bring a case. Why is Lindsay Clancy on trial? How come her doctors are not on trial? How come her psychiatrist is not on trial? How come her husband isn't on trial? How come he was never investigated? This entire trial boils down to the way women in America are treated. The police 100% just took his word of the account of events. He was a witness. He was the person who discovered the scene of the crime. Why was he not interrogated? I got clients that were miles away from the scene that are being held in jail, interrogated for days without a lawyer. I have clients who were forced to sign confessions. Why was he not investigated? How come they never questioned him and looked into him and his behavior? Because the scene of the crime told the story, very on the surface, of a woman who had a breakdown. And the police saw that and they said, oh, that makes sense. Case closed. We're done. We're cooked, fam. Oh, a woman went crazy, tried to unalive herself, unalived her kids. Makes sense to us, is what the police said. They said, closed case. Let's get on the heel toe express and get out of here. Why are there no men on TikTok talking about this? Why am I the only dude in the comments? Why is this entire case being investigated by women on the internet? Why is that where women are even getting the slightest modicum of consideration as people? Why is the internet the place where postpartum depression is actually being taken seriously? Because at the end of the day, the fact pattern of this case is not strong. This evidence is not strong. There is a lot of conflicting testimony. This is not a slam dunk case for the prosecution. Why did this go to trial? I have seen defendants that I've represented as a defense attorney who were not prosecuted when the prosecutor had better evidence than they have in this case. The defense just rested, and after closing arguments, the jury is going to deliberate. They're effectively going to be deliberating whether or not postpartum depression is real. It's not about whether she had it. It's not about whether or not, it's so clear this woman was unwell. It's going to come down to, and this is the worst thing you want a jury to be considering as on either side of a case, their personal opinion on a medical condition. That is the worst thing that you can task a jury with, because you got 12 people with 12 different opinions, 12 different walks of life. That is the worst situation for everybody. Nightmare fuel. No lawyer wants to be working on that case, because you might as well go to the roulette table and let that decide. 12 different people going into a deliberation room are going to have 13 different opinions. There is absolutely evidence that points to Patrick. Patrick absolutely has evidence pointing to him, and it's been alluded to at trial. I still think it's going to come up in closing statements. But two things can be true at once. We can have a woman who was really suffering, who was experiencing extreme psychosis, that with many contributing factors, her husband quite possibly one of them. We can have a husband who, suspicious circumstances around the unalivings, as well as his new marriage, he moved on quite quickly. And we can have a medical system that, absolutely no question in anybody's mind, medical system failed this woman. All three of those, we can walk and chew gum. We can hold two things in our hand. All of those things can be true. But at the end of the day, this case is boiling down to the sheer fact that we are in this position where we have women on the internet who are now making videos with Bratz dolls, trying to show people possible ways in which this tragedy could have possibly happened. The fact that we as a society are the ones having to investigate, having to hold people accountable, having to question the prosecutor's intentions, having to do all this research, engage in this discourse, having to question whether postpartum depression is actually a real condition, which of course it is. Tells you everything you need to know about women in America, the way they are treated, the way they are valued, and whether or not true justice is actually something that is sought for them. A man would never be in this position. A man would never be on trial in this way. A man would absolutely never have been put on trial with so little investigation. It just wouldn't have happened. There would have had to be fingerprints on everything, conclusive evidence, phone calls, letters, video footage if the man were on trial of him doing it. And then they'd be like, yeah, maybe let's prosecute this one. Tragedy all around. Awful thing happened to those children. Awful thing happened to the defendant, Lindsay Clancy. Absolutely horrific. However, the entire dialogue, discourse around this trial, the way that this all went down, the way that we are all having to do this work on behalf of the Massachusetts government is appalling and abysmal, and we should never be, none of us should ever be in this position, including Lindsay Clancy. Will we ever believe women? Will society ever give a shit about women? It is unbelievable.